She sent him packing to a cheap motel, only to find out the next morning he owned the entire hotel. The lobby of the Sterling Heights Hotel in Santa Monica was alive with activity. It was a Friday night, and every corner buzzed with the energy of weary travelers checking in, bellhops maneuvering luggage carts, and the soft hum of conversations bouncing off the polished marble floors. This was no ordinary hotel. Its grandeur was unmistakable. Towering palm trees framed the entrance, and a chandelier that cost more than most homes glimmered in the center of the ceiling. Behind the front desk stood Rachel, mid-30s, confident, but visibly worn down from the day's relentless pace. She had spent the last 12 hours juggling demanding guests, last-minute room requests, and the occasional irate caller who swore their reservation was somehow lost. Tonight, Rachel was in no mood for more surprises. Her uniform, crisp in the morning, now bore the faint wrinkles of a long shift, and her patience was threadbare. It was in this controlled chaos that the lobby doors opened once more. A man walked in, unremarkable at first glance, dressed in faded jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie that looked like it had seen better days. He carried no luggage, just a leather messenger bag slung over one shoulder. The man paused, scanning the room as if searching for something or someone. His appearance barely turned a head. Guests continued their conversations, and staff moved about with purpose. He was just another late-night walk-in. But there was something about the way he carried himself. His casual stance didn't match the nervous energy of most last-minute guests. He exuded a calm assurance, as if the bustling world around him was merely background noise. The receptionist noticed him too, but not for his quiet confidence. Instead, it was his disheveled appearance that caught her eye and sparked her judgment. Rachel gave a quick glance toward the man as he approached the desk, suppressing a sigh. She could already feel her irritation bubbling to the surface. In her experience, late-night walk-ins were usually a hassle, either someone trying to haggle for a better rate, or an exhausted traveler who wouldn't take no for an answer. And judging by this man's appearance, she thought she knew exactly which category he'd fall into. "Good evening," the man said, his voice calm and unassuming. "I'd like to book a room for the night, please." Rachel forced a smile, the kind that barely reached her eyes. "Unfortunately, we're fully booked tonight, sir," she replied, her tone brisk but polite enough to remain professional. She tapped at her keyboard, pretending to confirm what she already knew. The man didn't react immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying her with a mild curiosity that made her shift uncomfortably. "Fully booked?" he asked, his voice even. "Not a single room available?" Rachel stiffened, sensing a potential argument brewing. "That's correct. We've had a very busy day and all our rooms are occupied." She motioned toward the lobby full of guests as if to reinforce her point. "There's a motel a few blocks down. They might have availability." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment she thought she saw a flicker of amusement cross his face. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He leaned slightly on the counter, meeting her gaze. "No cancellations? No options at all?" he asked, his tone carrying no trace of frustration, only curiosity. Rachel felt her irritation flare. Why couldn't he just take her answer and leave? "Sir, I don't think this is the right place for you," she said, her voice slipping into a more condescending tone. "Like I said, there's a motel nearby. They'll probably have something that fits your situation." Her eyes flicked over his hoodie and jeans, the implication clear. This wasn't the place for someone like him. The man straightened, his expression unreadable now. For a moment, Rachel thought he might argue, but he simply nodded and stepped back from the counter. "Thank you for your time," he said evenly, turning to leave. He walked toward the lobby's seating area instead of heading for the exit, settling into a corner chair with a clear view of the front desk. Rachel couldn't help but glance his way every so often as she continued her work. What was he doing? Why hadn't he left? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man than met the eye, but she quickly dismissed it. Her job was demanding enough without worrying about random guests who didn't belong here. Still, something about the way he sat there, quietly observing, made her uneasy. But she brushed it off. After all, what could he possibly do? As the minutes dragged on, Rachel tried to shake off the strange sensation of being watched. The man hadn't moved from his corner seat, his eyes occasionally scanning the lobby but often landing back on her. She told herself it didn't matter. He was just some random guy who didn't take no for an answer, nothing more. Still, her frustration grew with every sideways glance. By the time the clock struck 11, the lobby had begun to quiet down. The crowd of guests dwindled, leaving Rachel with a manageable workload. She let out a sigh of relief, glad that her shift was nearing its end. The thought of finally sitting down with a glass of wine at home was the only thing keeping her going. But her relief was short-lived. "Excuse me," the man said, standing at the desk again. His sudden approach startled Rachel, though she quickly masked it with her usual practiced professionalism, or at least what was left of it after a long day. "Yes?" she said, her tone sharper than she intended. She didn't bother forcing a smile this time. "I'm sorry to bother you again," he said, his voice calm and composed. "But I couldn't help noticing that a few guests seem to have just checked in. Are you sure there's no room available?" Rachel felt her patience snap. "Sir, I've already explained this to you," she said, crossing her arms. "Those guests had reservations, which is why they got rooms. I don't know what else to tell you." He nodded, unfazed by her irritation. "I see," he replied thoughtfully. "And if I wanted to make a reservation for tomorrow night, would that be possible?" Rachel blinked, caught off guard. "Tomorrow?" she repeated. "Yes. Is there availability tomorrow?" he asked, his voice still maddeningly calm. She frowned, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she checked the system. "We have rooms available tomorrow," she admitted reluctantly, "but I'm not sure what difference that makes for you tonight." "It makes no difference," he said with a small smile. "But it's good to know." Rachel's irritation spiked. His tone felt almost smug, though she couldn't quite pinpoint why. "Look, I don't have time for this," she snapped, her voice louder than she intended. "If you don't have a reservation and you can't afford to stay here, then maybe you should stop wasting both our time and go to that motel I told you about." The words hung heavy in the air. The man's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. He gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, before stepping back again. "Understood," he said simply. Without another word, he returned to his seat in the corner of the lobby, his composure intact. Rachel felt a flicker of guilt, but she quickly squashed it. He wasn't her problem. She had done her job, and that was that. Or so she thought. But the way he watched her, quiet and composed, left a strange feeling she couldn't quite ignore. As the minutes turned to hours, Rachel went about her work. But she couldn't fully ignore the man in the corner. He didn't cause any disruptions. In fact, he barely moved, just sat quietly with an air of calm that somehow felt unnerving. Occasionally his gaze would drift toward the front desk as if he were mentally cataloging every detail. Rachel tried to convince herself that it didn't matter. People lingered in the lobby all the time, whether they were waiting for rides, meeting friends, or simply killing time. But this man wasn't scrolling through his phone or flipping through a magazine. He was just watching. At one point, she caught him observing a young bellhop who was struggling to maneuver a large luggage cart. The man stood up and, to Rachel's surprise, walked over to help. With a few quick adjustments, he showed the bellhop how to better balance the cart, earning a grateful smile from the overwhelmed staff member. Rachel frowned, watching the exchange. Who did this guy think he was? Playing the Good Samaritan didn't change the fact that he was wasting her time. But as the evening continued, she noticed other things, too. The man took an interest in the little details most guests overlooked. He watched as the concierge patiently handled a frustrated couple who demanded upgrades. He noticed the cleaning staff whisking away smudges on the glass doors moments after they appeared. And he saw Rachel herself, snapping at a coworker who had asked her a simple question about the reservation system. Every now and then he would glance at her, his expression unreadable. It wasn't judgmental or angry, just thoughtful, as if he were piecing together a puzzle. By the time midnight rolled around, the man finally stood up, slinging his leather bag over his shoulder. Rachel felt a wave of relief. Maybe now he would leave, and she could stop feeling like she was under a microscope. "Thank you for your hospitality," he said, his voice low but deliberate. Rachel barely looked up from her computer, muttering a distracted, "Have a good night," as he walked toward the exit. But just before he stepped through the revolving doors, he paused. Turning back, he gave one last glance around the lobby, at the pristine floors, the glowing chandelier, the staff bustling quietly behind the scenes. His eyes settled on Rachel one last time. Then, with a faint, almost knowing smile, he left. Rachel felt a strange sense of relief, but also an odd, lingering tension she couldn't quite shake. Little did she know the events of that night were far from over. The next morning, the Sterling Heights hotel staff gathered in the conference room for an unscheduled team meeting. Rachel yawned as she walked in, still groggy from her late shift. Meetings like these usually meant updates about policies or reminders to upsell services. Nothing exciting. She slumped into a chair near the back, scrolling through her phone until the manager arrived. The room filled quickly, and an unusual buzz of energy rippled through the staff. There was talk of a special announcement, though no one seemed to know what it was. Rachel glanced around, noticing that even the senior staff looked unusually alert. Something was definitely different. The door opened, and the general manager, Mr. Calloway, walked in. His usual confident demeanor was amplified by the presence of a man following closely behind him. Rachel's stomach dropped. It was the same man from last night, the one she'd dismissed and sent packing. He was here, standing tall and composed, wearing a tailored suit that looked nothing like the casual hoodie and jeans he'd worn before. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Calloway began, his voice cheerful but professional. "I hope you're all doing well. We have a very special guest with us today, someone who has taken a great interest in the operation of this hotel." Rachel's mind raced. Was this some sort of complaint? Had this man come back to make a scene about how she'd treated him? Her heart pounded in her chest as she sank lower into her chair. "Allow me to introduce Mr. Elon Musk," Mr. Calloway said, beaming. "The new owner of Sterling Heights Hotel." The room fell completely silent. Every set of eyes turned toward the man Rachel had dismissed so harshly the night before. He gave a small nod to the room, his face calm, but carrying the same knowing look he'd worn the previous evening. Rachel froze, her breath caught in her throat. Elon Musk? She had humiliated Elon Musk, the hotel's owner? Her mind reeled as snippets of last night's encounter replayed like a nightmare. The man she'd assumed was just another unkempt walk-in was now standing in front of the entire staff as their boss. Elon stepped forward, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. "I've always believed that the true heart of any business is its people," he began, his voice measured and thoughtful. "That's why I like to see things for myself, without any filters or special treatment. Last night I had the chance to observe how this hotel operates, from the incredible teamwork of the bellhops to the patience of the concierge staff. I saw a lot to admire." He paused, letting his words settle over the room. Then his gaze shifted to Rachel. She felt a flush creep up her neck as he addressed her directly. "But I also saw moments that reminded me why attention to detail and kindness matter so much in the hospitality industry." Rachel's stomach turned. He didn't say her name, didn't single her out explicitly, but the weight of his words was unmistakable. The room was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. And yet, as Elon continued, it became clear that he wasn't here to humiliate anyone, but to deliver a message that would resonate deeply. The air in the room was heavy as Elon's words hung over the staff. Rachel felt the weight of his statement pressing down on her, her pulse racing. He hadn't called her out by name, but the way his gaze had landed on her, steady and deliberate, left no room for doubt. She stared at her hands, too afraid to look up and meet anyone's eyes. Elon continued, his tone firm yet not unkind. "In a place like this, where people come expecting the best, how we treat them defines their experience. And sometimes, even the smallest gestures, a smile, a bit of patience, can make all the difference." He paused, scanning the room, his gaze softening. "I want to make something clear. This isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about growth. Every person in this room plays a role in the success of this hotel, and I'm here because I believe in its potential. And in all of you." The staff murmured in agreement, though Rachel remained silent, her thoughts racing. She couldn't stop replaying the way she had spoken to him the night before. The dismissiveness, the condescension. It all felt so glaring now, so avoidable. Her face burned with shame. "Starting today," Elon added, "I'll be working closely with management to ensure that our team has everything it needs to succeed. That includes training, support, and yes, accountability. We owe it to ourselves and our guests to set the highest standards." The room broke into polite applause, and Elon gave a small nod of thanks. As the meeting adjourned, the staff began to file out, buzzing with whispered conversations. Rachel lingered in her seat, her legs feeling like lead. Just as she worked up the courage to stand, she felt a presence beside her. Looking up, she saw Elon. Her heart nearly stopped. "Rachel, isn't it?" he asked, his voice calm but direct. She swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. "Yes, sir," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He regarded her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he smiled, a genuine, almost reassuring smile. "I know yesterday was a long day for you," he said. "It's not easy to be at the front lines when things get busy. But remember, every interaction counts. People notice how they're treated even when you think no one's watching." Rachel nodded quickly, unable to find the right words. I understand," she stammered. "And I'm so sorry about—" Elon held up a hand, cutting her off gently. "No need to apologize, just learn from it. That's all I ask." With that, he gave her a small nod and walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The meeting, the revelation, his words. It all swirled in her mind like a storm. For the first time in her career, she truly understood the weight of her actions, the ripple effect they could have. And in that moment, Rachel made a silent promise to herself. To do better, not just for the guests, but for her own growth. As Rachel walked out of the conference room, she felt a mixture of emotions, embarrassment, guilt, but also a spark of determination. Elon's words echoed in her mind, not as a reprimand, but as a lesson. She realized that her behavior, though born out of exhaustion, wasn't justifiable. Each guest walking through the doors deserved kindness, regardless of appearances. Over the next few weeks, Rachel made a conscious effort to approach her job differently. She greeted every guest with a genuine smile, even when she was tired. She took the time to listen instead of rushing to conclusions. And slowly, she began to notice the impact. Guests responded warmly, colleagues started to rely on her more, and the job that once felt like a grind now carried a renewed sense of purpose. The story of the mysterious owner became a quiet legend among the staff. No one knew when Elon might return, but the possibility kept everyone on their toes. For Rachel, though, the encounter wasn't about fear of being watched. It was a reminder of the kind of person she wanted to be. She no longer saw her job as just a paycheck, but as an opportunity to make small, meaningful differences in people's lives. The lesson she learned that day was simple yet profound. Never underestimate the value of kindness, and never judge someone by their appearance. You never know who you're talking to, or the impact your words might have. And so, as Rachel went on to become a pillar of excellence at Sterling Heights, the moral of the story became clear. It costs nothing to be kind, but the rewards can be life-changing. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales that inspire and resonate. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.